Hello, hello, and welcome to the Heathen Hangout podcast. I am joined, as usual, by some incredible people who I'm very privileged to know and consider my friends. This time around, we're going to be talking about online paganism and all that ways that can manifest and impact, and its benefits, its negatives, whatever. We'll go on a free-for-all discussion and see where we end up. But first, I would like to introduce my guests for this episode. If anyone wants to start first with anything at all that they want to say.
Sarah can go first.
Thanks. Hi, Sif. I'm Sarah Kerr. I am the current president of the Pagan Federation, and I've been a witch and a healer for about 25 years now. God, I feel old. My word.
Amazing. And Debbie?
You don't look old, Sarah, so that's what counts. Hi, Sif. I'm Debbie, and I am the founding chair of the Grove of Aletheia, which is a peer support group for disabled and neurodivergent pagans, where we consider accessibility from the ground up. I'm also the former community support officer for the Pagan Federation, their former disabilities manager, and the former chair of Pagan Aid. Oh, the other one. I'm also the chair of the Neurodivergent Student Network for neurodivergent students in higher education.
Oh, so impressive, both of you. It's so cool.
It's more it sounds more impressive than it is. It's mostly just running around like a headless chicken and
absolutely. Yeah. The reality is far different.
Yeah, there's no glamour here. I was promised by Mike Steigel. Are you listening, Mike? I was promised by Mike Steigel that that all Pagan Federation volunteers got a helicopter. I still haven't got a helicopter.
I have.
Oh.
This is favoritism. I just clearly didn't get high enough up the chain. This is what I get for making you president instead of lobbying for it myself. This is it's terrible. I wouldn't go up in it, you understand. I just want to look at it.
Yeah, no, it's not real. It sits on my shelf over there.
Nice. Compact. Mobile.
Yeah. Small enough to fit in my office.
I do have a paper aeroplane, but I had to make it myself, so I don't think that counts.
No, I don't think it does. Look at you two, your paper airplanes and your helicopters.
You've got a flying hat right behind your head. That counts.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. That does count. Thanks, Sarah. All right. Online paganism.
Yeah.
That is our topic today.
Okay.
Where do we want to start? Because I know that Sarah, in particular, the Pagan Federation, you being in control, the leader of the Pagan Federation, happened quite a big chunk over the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like sort of really boastful, but the PF started online events in terms of the pagan community here in the UK. In fact, Debbie here started them way back in 2016. So, we've been doing it for a long time. And I think when COVID hit and the pandemic kept everyone inside, or at least sort of, within the boundaries of their own garden, we decided that this was something that we could do and do well. So we put together a program that initially was something every day of the week, really. It was moots and book clubs and entertainment for kids and all sorts of things that we put on. And while interest in it did sort of fizzle out a bit towards, the end of lockdown and all that sort of stuff, I think people were tired of being online and not in person, which is very understandable. But it still kept people going. It connected them to each other, and it created this sense of community that we couldn't have because we couldn't go meet in a field or, that kind of thing that, we're so used to doing. And I think the reason we were so keen on doing it is that both me and Debbie come from places where, some of our lives have been like lockdown. I was a carer for 20 plus years, and the nature of it was that we didn't go many places, we didn't talk to many people. So finding that community and understanding the needs behind it, we got quite good at that because we did it.
Yeah, I think that it definitely, like you said, it sort of saturated the market during lockdown. Everybody was doing it. People that I had been and organisations that I've been campaigning for years to get them to pay attention and see, look, the PF is doing this, it is working. I mean, that first festival that we did, it was a week long. It was 8 days technically long. I did all of that from my phone. We had several speakers every day. We had music, we had quizzes, we had competitions, and we reached over 100,000 pagans worldwide over that just over a week.
Whew.
And
by the way, the content's still online, folks.
It is still online to see,
and
and
on our Facebook.
every couple of years, someone will share one of the videos with me and say, "I still can't believe you did this." And I look at it and go, "How on earth did I did that? How did I do all that on my own, with a phone and nothing else, with a very crappy internet connection?" And these days, I've got all of this different tech, and I still struggle. And I don't. I think it's because these days we just try it. I utilized a lot of, Facebook Live, and these days, because you try and do it across platforms and you try and make it as accessible as possible, it does make it a little bit more complicated. But there wasn't the technology to make it as accessible then as it is now. So it simplified it a little bit. But they'll send me videos and say, this still feels like the first time I was ever included in my faith community. And overwhelmingly, that's the feedback that we got back from people saying, I've never felt so included before. Oh my God, this is actually for us. We're not an afterthought. And I spent basically that entire week crying because I just couldn't believe the amount of feedback that we were getting from people. And we opened up all comments anybody could post in the event, and there wasn't a single negativity. There wasn't like you get now. You get trolls come in and trying to ruin it and stuff like that. You didn't get any of that. It was just 100% of people just overjoyed at having something that was there where they weren't included as a sort of EDI thing. They weren't included as an afterthought of how can we make this accessible? It was just for them. And that had never been done before. And to say that I did it basically on a whim, yay for ADHD. I couldn't believe that it had got as big as it did, and I spent about a month afterwards in a state of complete shock. And I couldn't get. This is where the autism really, and I mean I'm agoraphobic, so that's where it came from. I got most of my ideas come from when I get angry, don't they, Sarah? I get annoyed. And then I get productive. And with this, I was just really annoyed at all of the events that were going on that I just couldn't go to because I'm agoraphobic, but I'm not stuck in the house 100% of the time anymore. I can leave the house if there are things that I can go to that are accessible. And as long as I can take a carer with me. But at the time, none of them were accessible. They weren't even trying a lot of the time. The smaller moots were trying where they could. But the majority of the bigger events, if you ask them about accessibility, they got really defensive, they got aggressive, they made you feel like you were being a nuisance to them, that kind of thing. And people would come to the PF, especially after that first event, and say, but one of the things that we got most often was, I just want to know how to talk to them, to tell them what my needs are in a way that doesn't get me shouted at. And I just thought, I got so mad every time that happened because it was like, you shouldn't feel scared just to tell someone, I'm in a wheelchair. Is this wheelchair accessible? I'm in the need of an accessible toilet. Is that available? I'm in need of a changing room. Is that available? Just really small questions, big things for the individual, but small questions that are very, very easy to answer. So I lost my temper and decided, what about us? What can we do? And I just went live one day on Facebook and went, right, this is what we're going to do. And then, but the thing that struck me at first was the sheer amount of people that just wanted to give their time and energy. And they gave all that free of charge. And they did talks on their special interests, on their books. So many things were given for free giveaways. Like the pagan author community really came out there as just the heroes of that because books were given away for free left, right and center, and physical books as well, not just PDFs or ebooks. The police Pagan Association got involved, Pagan Dawn got involved, Moon Books got involved. It just so many different organizations just wanted to be a part of it and say to people, yes, we want to give you this content, yes, we want you to feel included. And it was just so, it was beautiful. It still shocks me a little bit. It feels like a dream, like it didn't really happen. because big things like that, they only happen once. You can't replicate that. And the longer that we did them and the more normal they became, unfortunately, as you normalize things, apathy starts to set in. So they just got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, but now they're normal.
Yeah.
And the PF does them at every single what's the thing? The
Festival.
word's gone. Thank you. Every single festival, 8 times a year, they're there, and they do them, and it's they did one last weekend.
We did.
Yes, and it was good. And there's poetry and music and talks and rituals and
although they've got smaller, because you're right, they've been normalized,
yeah,
and the fact that so much now is available for people online without any need to consider whether there's accessibility issues or not, because they're already solved. It's great to see the availability and the range of stuff that's now available online. I see online moots, I see online festivals, I see online lectures, I see online courses and all that sort of stuff that are really vital for people to connect with their community. And of course you see the bad stuff that comes along with it. You see those people that shouldn't really be running these things, or that they're not doing it for the right reasons, or that sort of thing. But largely, the ease with which you can access the pagan community and talk to people and meet people, even from different countries now, is just amazing. It's beautiful to watch. It really
it
is.
is. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there that there is always the bad stuff.
Of course.
And I think now the disability activists within the pagan community, our biggest issue is no longer saying what's available for us. It's about saying how do we continue to make sure that what's available to us and made for us it remains accessible, for one thing, and for another remains safe.
Yeah.
Because when you open up these channels, predators will come.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing you can do about that. So a lot of what we do at the Grove is not launched yet, but a lot of the stuff that we've been writing is about giving people the tools that they need in order to ascertain, is this a safe space? And actually to show them, because this is something that you think people would just know, but they don't, to show people that they're allowed to say no.
Yeah.
They're allowed to investigate a thing and then step back and say, this is not for me, this is not a safe space. They do not have to constantly be switched on to everything. And there is a cultural expectation of that. That really is quite toxic, especially in the pagan community, where you do have, and Sarah and I talk about this all the time, you have that airy fairy, fluffy pagan, everything's got to be positive all the time. That actually is incredibly toxic, because if you say anything negative to someone or you say something without a smile, you're in the wrong, but they're allowed to insult you as long as they smile while they're doing it. And it's that kind of thing that can make it a very difficult place to understand. Actually, is this just normal culture and I'm just uncomfortable, or is this actually unsafe?
Yeah.
And I'm uncomfortable for a reason that goes beyond just I don't fit in here. Because there are levels, and just because something doesn't feel safe to you doesn't necessarily mean that it's an unsafe place in general. That unsafe feeling could be coming from inside you. That could be a trauma thing. It's valid, but it doesn't mean you should erase the entire space. So understanding the levels of how to put boundaries in place, what boundaries look like in real time, that's something that I think those are skills that people just don't have naturally. And I think to keep people safe in online spaces, we need to start talking about them.
Yeah, I think there's a real sort of kind of, I don't really know what the issue is around safeguarding, but there's a lot of pagan groups that you really, really need to have some sort of serious conversations and some serious thought behind the safeguarding that they do. And a lot of the time they leave it up to the people that are in the group, when realistically, as the organisers, they're the ones responsible for that.
Yeah.
And that's something that we really need to be having conversations about within the community.
Oh, yeah.
you know, how can we work together to safeguard our spaces? How can we work together to safeguard the people within those spaces? How can we work to safeguard the organisers so that, you know, they know they're doing their best job, but they also know when what's being asked of them isn't realistic, isn't
unreasonable expectations.
is unreasonable. We, you know, there's this duty of care that we should have towards each other, that we do have towards each other, that I actually think in online paganism is even more important, because when you're in the room with people, there's deeper connections, there's deeper understanding, you can have face-to-face conversations, and that's not as possible when you're in a Zoom room, or, you know, when you're experiencing an online event without thought put behind it.
I think I'm going to interrupt to disagree with you.
Go on.
Because I think that entirely depends on who you are. When the pandemic was coming to an end and all of the lockdowns were coming to an end, there were a lot of discussions about how do we get things back in person, because doing things over Zoom, you don't get the connection, you miss that, you miss this, you miss the other. But for a great many people, they felt like the connection that they had suddenly got was taken very drastically away from them. There are many people, particularly neurodivergent people, who actually feel a greater connection online, because when they're in person, they have to consider a whole host of things that other people don't need to consider. Is the lighting in the room triggering? Is there a smell that's distracting? Is there too much noise? Am I able to sit in a position where I can see absolutely everybody and ascertain everything that's going on at the same time as being able to retreat? So all of these things are going off in the background of someone's head, and therefore the connections that they have, they're not really fully able to process until after the event's finished. When you're in the comfort of your own home, you don't have to really consider most of those things, because it's an environment that if you're privileged enough, you can fully control. So those connections that you have online are actually much more authentic for neurodivergent individuals. I think there's a middle ground, I think.
Absolutely. I think there's a middle ground that needs to be found there. And I think I'm talking more from an organizer point of view than I am from a guest point of view, if you get what I mean. I think there's a definite need for that to be a conversation, because we've dove into this, haven't we? The pandemic just happened, and we all kind of reacted and responded in the way that we did, and then things went back to normal, and that conversation hasn't been had.
I've been having
some
it.
spaces, but not in others. And I think it needs broadening. I think
it does.
There's a lot of scope for that to be better, for us to
I think
be
it
better.
was there were so many, like, for example, I do a lot of advocacy in higher education, and it's my primary focus at the moment, along with the group. And one of the things that I kept saying I was in academic committees, I was training tutors and stuff like that, and they kept saying, how can we get back to pre-pandemic? And I was like, hang on a second, why? Are you wanting to get back to pre-pandemic? Look at all of these things, and I list them. Look at all of these things that you've been able to achieve during the pandemic, that before the pandemic, when disabled students were saying that they needed this, you were saying that you couldn't do it because it was not a reasonable adjustment. You did it very, very easily. Okay, it probably took a lot of manpower, but in terms of complexity, it was not. You did it very, very quickly. Why are you not trying to create some kind of hybrid movement and hybrid culture between pre-pandemic and post-pandemic? What's wrong with that? And so often the answer was just they'd blink at me as if they couldn't believe that someone was suggesting that the world at the other side of this global pandemic didn't look exactly the same as it did before. And I was like, is this because I'm autistic that I'm just seeing a different angle, or are you lot just being really, really slow on the uptake of this? Because they say that we're the ones that struggle with change, but I absolutely beg to differ. I do not struggle with change. I struggle with stupid change, and unexpected change. But this to me seemed like a stupid thing. It seemed like a completely illogical step to take, when all of these things, all of this accessibility was being done, and all of this money was being saved. Hit them in the pocket, and that's where they start paying attention. All of this money was being saved. All of this, everything was becoming so much greener because there was so much less travel, and animals were coming back into cities and all that kind of thing. And they wanted to go back to smelly smog and long commutes and sitting in rooms that cost a fortune to hire. And I don't understand why. I mean, the Pagan Federation, you had several meetings every year that were physical in-person ones or hybrid, because you were very good at doing hybrid even before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Even as far back as like 2015.
Yeah.
You know, Skype was terrible, but it was yeah, but you used it. But after the pandemic, you've had less physical meetings.
We haven't
And
had
look at all the money you've saved. Look at the extra people that could be there and that kind of. There you go.
We haven't had any. We have
Exactly.
completely embraced the online life. And although there are a few people that have mentioned, you know, it'd be great if we could do some in-person stuff. But by and large, it's enabled us to do much more because we're not spending money on hiring meeting rooms and travel for committee members down to the big smoke and all that sort of stuff. And I think long may it continue in some respects.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to do, you know, an in-person meeting, but actually the logistics of that, where we're all based and getting everyone together and all the rest of it, is actually going to be a bit of a logistical nightmare. Long may it continue.
Every time we had a meeting as well, and this is not just for the PF, but for everything that you and I have done together. We've done several things. We would Pagan Aid together and all these other things. Every time we've got together, a large portion of that physical time was taken up with socializing, which is fantastic. We were a community. We were a family. That group that was in the committee at the time and that are still most on your committee now, we were a family and we bickered and sometimes it was toxic, but we were a family and we loved each other. I adore every single person that was on that committee, except maybe one, and you know, who cares? But either way, everybody got on. Everything was very productive. However, it's so much more productive when the socialization is separate.
Yeah.
And when the only time you can socialize is when you get together physically to do productive things, the two wear and tear on each other. Yeah. If you take most of the actual work that needs doing and put it into an online forum, and then when you get together, actually put some time there that is for socializing only, the productivity soars.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
And it's also the fact that because of all the money that's been spent trying to get the work done, you don't have the money then to do the socializing stuff that you need for team building.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a deeply personal.
We still use online spaces for that as well, because, you know, we live so far apart for the most part. I mean, me and Sif don't. We could actually, you know.
Could.
But we prefer to sit at our desks and use Zoom. So,
yeah.
Because we can do it in the moment, because we can take more time at it, because we're not traveling, because it just makes sense.
Yeah.
And you know, we all do think about our travel and how much that impacts the world around us as well. And we need to work out what the PF carbon footprint is, because I swear since we stopped doing in-person meetings, it has just reduced to, you know, very, very little at all.
Get Anne on that.
But I say Anne's happy.
Anne's very happy. But it just makes a lot of sense. It just does. And there is nothing, and we do, you know, one-to-one catch-ups, we, you know, and we might do a bit of talking about PF stuff, but generally we're chit-chatting about things we've been up to and, you know, things we've got on, that sort of thing. We had a call like a fortnight ago, Sif, where, you know, we kept popping back to the PF business at the moment, but, you know, largely we were talking about Sif's beautiful cards and and, you know, other things that were happening. So, you know, it was I don't ever want to see us go back to pre-pandemic in that respect, because I probably would be reduced back to not having a community again.
I think one of the things that has drastically changed, and I don't know if you'll mind me mentioning this, but I'm going to do it anyway because you love me, so you'll forgive me. Pre-pandemic Pagan Federation, not the membership, but the volunteership was incredibly toxic.
Yeah,
there was absolutely a element of everybody just sticking to their own patch. When we did get together, when the committee got together, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
When everybody else got together, it was very patchy in who would talk to who, because there was no team building, there was no community there at all. And when you tried to build it, people were extremely resistant to it,
Yeah.
because people stuck to their own little teams. And even within teams, it was very difficult to get anybody to start feeling close. There wasn't that even a working relationship that was built. And I mean, you and I blew that completely out of the water by deciding this is my person and I'm keeping her. And that made things easier. But one of the things that I was absolutely adamant about when Mike made me disabilities manager was, I am not putting up with this.
Yeah.
If you're going to work with me, you're going to treat me like a person. I'm going to treat you like a person, and I don't care. This is the thing that people find really annoying about me. I don't care how big your ego is. I am doing this work to get the work done. I don't care if it upsets you that I don't want to pander to you in this moment. I don't expect people to pander to me. I would never expect that. And when people do it, I get very annoyed. It's like, no, if I'm unreasonable or you don't like what I'm saying, tell me. You know, and
that was one of the reasons that I took up the chair, really, was that I could see that there was this massive disconnect. And I volunteered in several different roles within the PF before I took this one up.
Yes, you did.
And I worked in district teams, and I worked in national community sport teams, and I was all over the place. But it gave me this insight that that some sort of way to connect us was desperately needed. And I think because I took up the chair literally as the pandemic started,
Yeah.
and wasn't expecting to take it up for another 6 months yet. So
yeah, it was sort of dropped on you.
I was literally thrown in at the deep end. Swim, just swim. And I saw the possibilities with Zoom and with other platforms like it to bring together that community, to make sure that we had a way to communicate, that we could collaborate successfully, because it was so much better than anything that had gone before. It gave us so many new possibilities. And really, I think that having to make that change very quickly is what's contributed to the success of the changes that we've brought about over the last 5 years, and the fact that we are seen in a much better light than we were, that our volunteers feel a lot better about being in the PF and are more willing to contribute to their community, that they're more willing to talk to each other, they're more willing to work together. It just I have to take some of the credit, obviously, but Zoom helped that immensely, because without that tool, without that rapid shift to online paganism, and without the acceptance of it, that never would have worked. And
let's give you at least 70% of the credit.
I agree with that.
I saw how difficult that was for you and how hard you were working. And one of the things that you and I we've always put our friendship first, always, because one thing that I didn't do I've been working as an activist for disabled pagans for, God, it's been 10 years.
Wow.
It's just over 10 years. That's insane. And before I met you, it was all about, I've made myself very ill. I hospitalized myself several times, because even though everything that I did was online, people acted like that wasn't as big an effort as it would have been if I was doing an in-person volunteer role. But I talked to hundreds of people a week, and I made myself available 100% of the time. And because of my personal traumas, I found it very, very difficult to switch off. And I found it very difficult. I found it impossible to say no to someone if they said that they needed something from me, or if I perceived that someone would be helped by me if I got involved in something. And I mean, I still say it now. And Sarah tells me off if somebody says thank you to me for something, I'll say anything, anytime. And really think of the toxicity of that when it's on a person, or when that expectation is on a person. But at the time, it was anything you need, anytime you need me. And then people took advantage of that, and it wasn't just what they needed, it's what they demanded. And they wanted me to do things for them that were unreasonable, and I did it anyway, because I was constantly trying to meet the needs of every single person I met simultaneously, which, let me tell you, is a pretty impossible task, because these people came from all over the place. I didn't really know these people and their expectations and their needs, only what they expressed over the internet. So it was really, really difficult. And then along comes Sarah and goes, what are you doing? Look at you. You're a mess. You pull yourself together. And it was it was a very difficult conversation, but it's taught me so much. And I took everything that I learned, mostly from Sarah, but from the PF, people like Mike Steigel, Alex Bear, yourself, Sif, who you're still not as good as I am at saying no, even now. But you know, you'll
point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just not a nice person. I think that helps. I'm a good person. I'm not a nice person. Not by the stereotypical sort of what is it that Jean Merrily says? She said that I'm compassionate to a debilitating degree, and that I will agree with, but I'm not always the gentlest of people with my compassion. I conduct aggressive compassion, violent compassion sometimes. You will have my compassion and you will like it. But at the time, I found it very, very difficult to just sort of put myself first. So now one of the things that I do with the Grove is my volunteers come first and the work that we do comes second, because you cannot work any other way when it comes to volunteers. It shouldn't work any other way with employees, but often it does. But with volunteers, it should not work any other way. And I know that AUK is moving that way.
Mm-hmm.
There are still volunteers within AUK who put too much pressure on themselves and allow other people to put too much pressure on them, in a way that makes me flinch. It's difficult to watch, but I know it's not my place to say to them, dude, you know, it was Sarah's place because she was one of my closest friends. She's godmother of my children. But I mean, I could do it to Dan and Sabrina.
I think that's a really valid point about on the online world as well, is that it is very now, and there's this intense pressure to be constantly present. And I think that's one of the downsides of
FOMO.
Yeah, absolutely. FOMO and the fact that it's 24/7, you know, and I think that's one of the downsides to having that online world constantly accessible, is that you think you've got to be switched on all the time, and that you've got to be there no matter what, and that you've got to be on it, and you know, paying attention and attending things and all the rest of it.
There's all that sort of, everybody thinks they've got to have an answer for all things all the time as well.
Yeah.
And one of the things for me was, when I was growing up, if I didn't have a response to someone, that was something that got me a lot of trouble. I would have physical pain inflicted on me, social pain, bullying, that kind of thing. So I always learned that I had to have a response to absolutely everything. But when I did, I was also told, you've got an answer for everything, you don't you? So there was that sort of tightrope that I had to walk constantly. And then you get into this online world and people just have this expectation. No, let's change the word. Let's call it what it is. They have a sense of entitlement, an inflated sense of entitlement that demands the attention of other people, the words of other people. If you respond to someone, you're wrong no matter what you say. If you don't respond to someone, you're being a coward and you're weak, and oh, you can't take it, you can't handle a joke, you can't, and you've walked away, as if walking away from a confrontation is a negative thing, even though all his lives we've been told, just walk away, just say no. So there's very much this sort of conflicting expectations that no matter what you do, you're wrong. And so one of the things that I try to drill into people now is, and Sarah is the reason that I am able to do this after years of drilling it into me, is there is a difference between a reaction and a response. If you keep pushing me, you're going to get a reaction, even if it's online, where technically I could walk away. I could just put my device down and I could stop. If you keep pushing me, eventually the trauma responses, the ADHD, and just my general being a knob is going to take over, and I'm going to give you a reaction. You're not going to like it, and I don't like it, so please don't push me that far. However, if you give me a minute, if this is a safe environment in which I feel that I'm not going to have words put in my mouth if I don't speak for myself, you're going to get and you give me time to frame a response, you're going to actually get something that is much more reflective of who I am and not reflective of all just a jumble of trauma responses and a mask that was created against my will. And you're probably going to enjoy the exchange much more. The online world should be a place where you can really empower yourself in that.
And where you
Because
should be able to be empowered to take that pause.
yeah,
But I think as well that's another one of the big issues with the online world is that instantaneous. They expect you to be available now. You know, that old the telephone is rude because it's ringing on your desk and it's answer me now, answer me now, answer me now, answer me now. And the online world is no different. And if you need to take a moment, whether that's because you're processing something that's been said, or whether you're you know, forming your response, the online world kind of pushes and pressures you to answer me now, answer me now, answer me now. And I think that that adds to some of the toxicity that you can find in some spaces because of that entitlement of, you know, this person is available to me because they're online. And I think we need to be very consciously aware of that in our spaces as well, that we give people the time and the space that we would give them if they were in the room with us, you know, that we would give them if we were really truly considering them as human beings and not just some sort of faceless entity on the internet. So I think that's probably the biggest. Those are the biggest downsides to online spaces, and I don't think that's limited to pagan spaces. I think that's everywhere.
No, absolutely everywhere.
I don't think it's something that, you know, just pagans find. I think that's something that's in every space wherever you go. And I think that's something that we really need to be mindful of, that we've made all these lovely accessible spaces, but then we're not making them safe because we have this entitlement of thinking that we've got someone's attention, therefore they have to answer, or they have to react, or they have to, you know.
But then that raises another issue, and this is something that you and I have discussed at great length over years, and something that just recently I had an extremely upsetting issue with, actually, where in order to create those safe spaces and in order to empower a culture of people being able to form responses instead of reactions, for people to be able to say, actually, this was more a trauma response than it was what I felt, and I'd like to reframe what I say, you know, that kind of taking accountability for yourself, taking accountability for the impact that you have on other people, and just showing a little bit of grace and compassion, not just for the people that you're talking to, but yourself in those spaces. In order to do that, there has to be rules. There has to be a line drawn in what admins of spaces and moderators of spaces will accept and what they won't, what you will class as a person's right to personal expression, and what you class as actually going too far and taking away the safety from other people. Now, in AUK, you've got this wonderful rule about frit. And if someone isn't keeping frit, it doesn't matter what they're doing. It doesn't matter if they haven't broken a specific rule. It's still creating a culture of toxicity, and therefore it's not allowed. And I really do feel that other spaces need to take heed of that. Then you have another issue of, how do you police it? How do you make sure that the people enforcing this idea of frit and actually using it to project their own agenda, and using it to silence people that they just don't like? And one of the ways that you do that, obviously, is to have a group of people that hold each other accountable. But you also have to have a framework. You have to have a general idea of, these things are definitely not allowed, and these sorts of things will be challenged. Because you don't just want to do a blanket ban of, if you've got this opinion, you can fuck off. You have to give people the room to grow. And Sarah and I discuss this a lot. Everybody just, they don't allow anybody room to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. The person I am now and the person that Sarah met when we first met are wildly different people. I was hot-headed, I was aggressive, and I was basically just an exposed nerve at all times.
Oh,
and
you're just more yourself, Debbie.
I am now, because the mask fell off. The mask, I was going to say fell off. It was ripped off and torn to pieces. It was a very painful process. But now I do still revert back to that sometimes when I feel backed into a corner, or when I'm feeling particularly stressed, or when I'm being extensively triggered. It does happen. But one thing that never happens anymore is spreading it to other people. I will always say now I'm taking a step back, and I have trusted people in my life that I trust to turn around and say to me, I don't know if you can see it, but you need to step away.
Yeah.
And I trust their judgment over mine sometimes. I don't thank them for it until probably days later when I'm much calmer. But it's like Sarah and I have it's almost ruined our relationship a few times.
Yeah.
That you've told me I need to step away, and I've been like, "Who there? Do you think you are?" And the response to that has been, "I'm your best friend. That's who I am, and I love you, but you're being a knobhead." And you need to be able to say that to people. Maybe not in those words, but you need to be able to say that to people sometimes, and say, in this situation, you may be traumatized. Your responses may be completely understandable, but you're still the toxic entity in this situation. And that is for online, it's for in person. It's more difficult to do in person, I think, because people do tend to shy away from interpersonal confrontation. I never have, and that's why people don't like me. If a confrontation needs happening, I'm not aggressive about it anymore. But I will, if someone needs to be told, actually, what you're doing is really problematic, 100% of the time I'm willing to do that. And a lot of the time I do it whether people want me to or not, because all I can see is long-term stress. People are all like, oh no, let's just leave it for now. It's like, if you allow this to carry on, it's going to spiral. So I'm gonna deal with this now, and you can all hate me for it. This is why Dan says that I'm very Lokian, because I would rather cause a problem in the moment that is resolved very quickly, even if people don't like me afterwards, than have everybody else feel stressed over time. I'd rather take that stress on myself. So in these spaces, one of the things that happened to me recently was I wanted to safeguard my members. And I was told that the way that I was going about it was totalitarian, and it was unsafe, because we had a member of the community who was trying to access a space who had several allegations made against them of a pretty serious nature that I won't go into. But it was not just they'd been a twat online. These were in person, extremely concerning accusations. And the view of certain people was, this person hasn't been a problem in this space, therefore there's nothing we can do. And I said, no, that's not happening.
I think a lot of people though, and I think this is something that we have to be wary of, is that there is something, especially in the online space, where if someone is accused of something, that they are immediately sort of ostracized for that. They call it cancel culture. And you talk about people not being able to grow and not being able to do anything about. And there are some things that people can do that absolutely mean that they shouldn't have access to spaces anymore, because you are safeguarding a wider community. But I do believe that there's this propensity in the online spaces to have convicted that person before proof has been seen or heard.
Trial by public opinion.
And I think that becomes very dangerous, because then if that person is then proved innocent of that, then their life is already ruined.
I agree, but I think that there does need to be a line, though, doesn't there? If
absolutely.
There are people where even if the accusations haven't been proven, there are certain accusations that it becomes a point of, when accusations come from several different places.
I think what
you can't just open up vulnerable people to
no, absolutely.
But finding that line is incredibly difficult.
Finding that line is incredibly difficult, and I think that's yet another conversation that needs to be had, because what you don't want to do is ostracize someone who those allegations haven't been proven, but you also want to safeguard the community. So removing that person from that space temporarily while the things are processed and events happen, to safeguard them as much as to safeguard the group, because at the end of the day they then become victims of circumstance, don't they? And I think they're still a human being at the end of the day. They still have certain rights and we still have certain responsibilities to them. But I think there's this danger in the online space of a rumor becoming truth too quickly, and it's not true necessarily. But you have to balance that with those very real cases of this person should not be in this space. This person should not have access to this.
And I think there's also that issue of believing victims.
Absolutely.
For whom access to criminal justice systems and that kind of thing is gate kept by circumstance. It's naive and incredibly ignorant to think that isn't still unfortunately going on.
Unfortunately, very true. Absolutely.
Exactly. Especially if you come from a minoritized community, which paganism does fall into.
Absolutely.
And there are other minoritized groups within paganism as well. So when you have that, you want to acknowledge the pain of the victim, and you want to say, I believe you and this is a safe space for you. At the same time, you don't want to go around just believing every toxic or potentially harmful thing that you hear, because anybody at any time really could say anything. And I mean, again, a personal anecdote, people have said some horrible things about me, really truly horrible, to the point where it's given me nightmares thinking that people would believe the things that they've heard about me. There's no evidence of any of it, because it's not true. That's where the line, I think, should be drawn. There's no evidence except this person said it, rather than actually there is a police crime number and stuff like that. So like for me, I have been kept out of spaces because people have considered me to be a toxic entity. Looking back from my most traumatized moments when I hadn't done any personal growth, I was the victim. 100% I was the victim. However, I was also a toxic entity in that space. You can be the victim and the problem at the same time, because just because you're the victim of a thing, it doesn't mean that, one, you're not perpetuating it, and two, that your issues aren't causing a problem for someone else.
Absolutely.
Managing everybody's needs at the same time, it's impossible.
It is.
You cannot do it. So
it is.
Surely there's rules that can be put in place to say this is valid, but in this space it's not relevant.
Absolutely.
And I think that needs to be talked about as well. Like, for example, in pagan spaces, I am autistic. I have ADHD. I have complex PTSD, pretty severe complex PTSD. I've got agoraphobia. I have got a touch phobia. Most of those aren't really relevant. They do affect me in the way that I see everything. But in terms of other people, it's none of their business. And they shouldn't have to constantly tiptoe around me to meet my needs. However, the pagan community is a very touchy-feely place.
Heathens hug each other.
I went to Hellsmoot last year, and the amount of platonic masculine love that was thrown about was so beautiful. I could not believe the amount of men that looked like the kind of people you would not want to meet down an alley, just hugging each other. And not once did a guy go up to a woman and initiate anything. The women initiated first, and that is a huge thing. It's, do you mind if I hug you? Do you mind if I touch you in any way, shape or form? And it was always the women who initiated when it came to men. And that I was like, whoa, because you just don't see that in most spaces. Not a single person touched me.
Mm-hmm.
Usually I go to pagan events and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't. And then I feel like I have to explain myself. Not a single person touched me. 2 people offered me hugs and I said, I'm sorry, I can't. And they just went, okay.
Yeah. There's a
I was like,
need.
What?
There's a real need for this base level of respect and understanding to infiltrate all of our spaces, because I understand you really want to like connect with that person and you want to show your affection and all the rest of it, but there are other ways of doing those things. Heathens do it so well. I think there's a lot that, as a wider community, that a lot of pagans could learn from the way that heathens are around each other and the way that they act between their circles. I think it's amazing.
It's unbridled joy.
Is
what they show.
fabulous.
It's just I am so happy that you're here, but there's no
still,
expectations at all. I just love you. That's it.
Yeah, I'm still angry that I missed Housemoot last year for that very reason. So yeah, and I think all the subjects that we've talked about today is really complicated, and it's as complicated as human beings are at the end of the day, isn't it? We have these amazing spaces that can be so good, but we also have all these things that we have to be mindful of and that we have to navigate, and some things we have to legislate. We have to have policy, we have to have frameworks and procedures.
There has to be a line drawn somewhere. Somebody has to take responsibility for where that line is, and you're never going to get to a point where absolutely everybody agrees with where the line is put, and being the people that has to make that decision. Nobody has empathy for that person. Not really. Nobody has. Rarely people have sympathy for that person, but nobody has empathy for. Or everybody's just really quick to judge that person.
Despite the fact that they're trying their best to accommodate as many people as possible, while believing stories and managing needs and expectations. And
if it comes down to online, there is a lot more wiggle room for very dynamic lines. You can move them very, very quickly, whereas in physical spaces you have to write. My dog is whining at me. You have to write the policy before an event, and then fix it afterwards. So if something isn't working in the moment, there's actually very little that you can do to change that. You can deal with that particular issue, but go outside.
Changing the policy and the framework around it needs to be sat around a table later on.
Whereas online you can convene. You've got group chats, and you can go straight to the chat and say, this incident has arisen, we had not foreseen this.
What can we do?
People cannot foresee all things at all times. As much as I try with all of my little brain tabs and stuff, you cannot see all things at all times, although autistics will argue we can see most things at most times. It's difficult, and even if you can see all of the things that were relevant in that moment's gone. Here is new moment. Hello, welcome to the new world. So you can constantly be changing things in that way. Plus, there's a new generation coming onto the internet every single day. And that changes things drastically. Like when TikTok started, and what were they calling them? Twitchers, baby witches, or that kind of thing. I'm sounding very old now. But there was a thing where people were going on to TikTok and they were doing videos about their personal journey as pagans that did not seem to be rooted in any kind of research, in any kind of community practice. It was just whatever they'd made up. Completely valid for them personally. Everybody's personal faith beliefs is their business.
Didn't make
how
it
they practice.
True, though.
It doesn't make it true, and it doesn't make it relevant to the wider community. So when people are going on there and they're not specifying, like they do in the heathen community, personal gnosis, this is my unverified personal belief system. They're not saying that. They're just saying, do this, do that. And all social media platforms have a culture of, this is the way that things are done. If you're not doing it this way, then you're not doing it right. And yet we also have this culture of ask 10 pagans a question, you'll get 15 different answers. So how do you write policy that empowers freedom of expression, empowers dynamic and diverse conversations and practice, at the same time as ensuring that there is an equity of experience. It is incredibly difficult, and I think anybody who doesn't see that is either incredibly naive, which is fine. I wish I was more naive. It's a simpler place to be, or they're being deliberately obtuse. And I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for naive people. Again, I wish I was one of them. However, people who are deliberately obtuse or just trying to put barriers in the way of equality, and equity and accessibility, I have very little tolerance for. And that's when people tend to start thinking that I'm not a nice person, because I get quite dogmatic. And I don't really allow room for. I am a very intolerant person because I am intolerant of intolerance. And I say that quite often. So, but in these spaces, if you let in one person that has problematic views and say, well, they're just one person and it's just one opinion, it never stays like that. The first time someone says something transphobic, there will be a trans person or a trans ally there,
absolutely,
in the audience. So you don't really always have to think about how are these policies and rules going to affect the person saying the bad things. You've also got to think about the impact on the audience that sees it. You know, for every transphobic thing someone says, there will be an audience who sees it and it then stops talking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't defend themselves. They don't get involved in the community anymore because that has been triggering for them. And I mean, there are people who say maybe they shouldn't be so sensitive. To those people, I say fuck off.
Amen.
Sensitivity is a human. We are incredibly fragile creatures. And I don't mean that in a, oh my God, look at these snowflakes. I'm a snowflake myself. I am one made of girders and steel.
Proud
yes,
to be a
proud,
snowflake. Thank you
proud
very much.
steel snowflake. But we are incredibly fragile creatures.
Yeah.
Putting my psychology hat on, you know, that whole, oh, it's all in your head. I'm sorry, I am a brain in a meat suit. Where the fuck else did you think it was going to be? Everything that goes, everything that you process, any input you get, whatever someone says to you, you hear, you see, is then processing your brain through a very, very complex set of neurons that are attached to every part of your body. So if it goes in here, it affects everything else. So you're not just safeguarding people's mental health and people's position within their community. This is a whole person thing. This is a holistic thing. You're protecting their entire self. And also, I think Kathy Burke said it quite well recently, and Miriam Margolyes said a similar thing. If you could change a small thing that doesn't really affect you, such as your language, or just shutting up, you know, sometimes people could just shut the fuck up. If you could change that small thing, and it makes a difference to 10 people who suddenly feel better about themselves, why would you not do it? What's wrong with you that you don't want to do that? Who hurt you? That's what I want to know. Who hurt you that you think that you feel safer in yourself when other people hurt? I've been in that place of I'm just going to throw around all these awful things because that's the only thing I know, and therefore that's where my nervous system feels safe.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel nice. Just because you feel safer than what you think the alternative is, it doesn't mean you feel nice. It's not. I feel sorry for all these people that just walk around constantly just feeling cruel, because it's a sick feeling in your stomach. It's a heavy weight in your stomach. And you see it so much online. So I am fiercely protective of the online spaces that I've been creating for over 10 years. I can't believe that. That's properly freaked me out. I was so young. Young, naive, and I mean, I've won awards for the spaces that I've created, so something I'm doing must be right. I'm not entirely sure which bits of it is. Make me a list, please, of the things so I can keep replicating them. But it's I think the ability to constantly say, okay, we got this wrong, let's go rethink, and also saying to your members, we are human and we're fallible.
And here's what we're doing to be accountable for our mistakes, because although we are human and we do make mistakes and we do get things wrong, you know, we are aware that we need to have a process through which we examine that and that we make some move towards sorting it out, you know.
And I think you and I are in that position as well, which is quite, I like being in this position. The buck stops with me. And the reason I like being in that position is not for the power, because I don't see it as a power, I see it as a responsibility. I am a servant of my community. Every single volunteer role I've had is not because of an ego thing. It is, I want to serve. My whole pagan practice is service to my community. But because the buck stops with me, and I know that nobody in this world is harder on me than I am, and that nobody in this world blames me more for stuff than I do, I know that I am not going to surround myself with sycophants. I surround myself with people who feel very comfortable saying to me, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Alex Bear, you know the relationship that Alex and I have had over the years. We've had extremely tumultuous relationship. We have ripped each other apart, but we've also put each other back together again in a lot of very healthy ways. And now there have, not recently, not within the last year or so, but there have been situations where he's come to me and said, if you keep opening your mouth, you're going to ruin your own life. Shut up. And I have shut up. And sometimes he'll just message me and say, are you being a twat today? I'm like, no, I'm all right today. It's all right. And we just have twat check-ins just to see how we're doing. And then I've got people in my life, and I think all people in positions of authority or leadership or positions of care, I prefer to say positions of care over other people, should have these people in their lives that do feel able to say to them, actually, you're wrong. But also people like Sarah who say to you, you need to give yourself a break. You need to just admit that in this moment, you did the best that you could. And sometimes, even if everybody's doing the best that they can, crap things still happen. Toxic situations still happen. And in these spaces, online especially, there is one thing that we have there that you don't have in real life, and that's proof. And sometimes the nervous system needs to take in that proof again and say, actually, I did do the best that I could. Here is irrefutable proof that in that moment, that is the best that I could do. And it's not great. This is still crap. And horrible things still happened. But I need to remember that I'm human and I am not, in fact, a deity. And I think being pagan offers us a unique perspective on infallibility, because not a single one of our deities is omnipotent, and we do not have one single divine entity that is never wrong and has a plan for all things. They are messed up. You've got Odin, who literally was like, I can't stand not knowing all the things. Have my entire optical organ because I cannot stand sitting.
They're true reflections of our humanity.
And humanity that stayed static as well.
Absolutely.
These things have remained relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we need to take lessons from that as well. That we are fallible. Things are going to go wrong. We are going to make mistakes. There's going to be things that hurt people. There's going to be all sorts of those things, because that is life.
Yeah, it is. And I think as well, because we are volunteers, it's easy to forget that we're also actually just trying to access our own faith community.
Yeah.
And that includes actually practicing the faith. I get so wound up in being a volunteer. I actually haven't performed a ritual in years. I've only ever been a part of 4 public group rituals in my entire 20 odd years as a pagan, because the first one that I went to was really traumatizing. It was very badly done. The people in that space were not safe. And then the next one that I went to was run by Emma Hoole, who's on the PF committee, and that one was much safer, but still quite overwhelming for me. And then I went to one at the beach that Dan did, and anybody who's been to a ritual run by Dan Cultus knows that it is one of the most profound things that you can ever experience.
That guy's got skills when it comes to ritual.
Oh yeah. It's so difficult for me to see him in those situations and take him seriously until he opens his mouth. Once he opened his mouth, I'm in it. I'm there in the space. But until then, I just see the idiot who fell backwards down the stairs onto my husband while trying to get a sofa up there, and the guy who I got a Gatling gun Nerf gun for his birthday, which is a few days before Steve, so that they could sit and shoot at each other. And then they were sat there talking about all the ways that they could make them more lethal, like filling them with water and freezing them to shoot at each other. You know, so when I look at him, I see my kid's godfather, and who is frankly an idiot. And then other people see him as this academic, and you know, he's doing a doctorate, and he's incredibly intelligent, and he's got that big head. It has a massive brain in it with all of the squigglies. You know, this is an incredibly intelligent and spiritual person, and to see him shift from talking about putting his wife in a wheelchair with his skills during the flight-in, which I can't believe I missed, by the way, to opening a ritual and leading people through incredibly emotional group work. Watching him do that is probably one of the most profound spiritual experiences of my life. And then I went to Hellsmoot, and I was terrified of going into that space because it was the biggest group ritual that I'd ever seen. And I mean, Sif saw me when I was on the way out. I couldn't even speak. So being online is the safest place for me, because those kind of situations have such a profound effect on me that it takes too long to recover from, frankly. And I don't know how I managed to come back the next day, if I'm honest. That it was just wow. My mind was complete. And I'm running one this year. Let's see how that goes. You're gonna have to scoop me up off the floor in like a wheelbarrow and just wheel me off.
Be ready to carry her out, Sif. Be ready to carry her out.
I mean, you were incredible in Hellsmoot.
I just feel like all I did was sit there and just absorb everything, and because again, I am agoraphobic, and so online spaces are the safest space for me. And I have been to a lot of group pagan events, and they've taken me weeks, sometimes months, to recover from because of how difficult I find them. But nobody else was doing talks on accessibility and paganism, so I felt that I had to go because nobody else was doing it. And then I amassed a brilliant team, and all the team members started doing them, and that was much more helpful. But I still felt that I had to be there for my team. So even though I weren't doing the talks, I was still at the events, and I was having seizures because of the stress and stuff like that. So I was. This is such an awful thing to say, but when the lockdown happened, I breathed a sigh of relief, because now everybody had to stay at home, and I was not the freak that just wasn't going anywhere, and everybody was cleaning everything. And I've got a contamination phobia and an OCD where I wash my hands to a debilitating degree, and actually make myself quite ill. So everybody was just washing everything, and I was like, the world is dancing to my tune. And then people started dying, and I was like, no shit, too far.
Too far, yeah. Not that far.
Whoa. I just to sort of add, I actually lost my grandmother to COVID, so I'm not making light of it in any way. But you know, those first few weeks of nobody's going to touch me, there is no expectation anymore for me to act in a socially acceptable sort of touchy way, and that was what helped me to take my mask off and actually become a person rather than a jumble of trauma responses. So going to Hellsmoot, Dana told me over and over and over again, this is a safe place for you. And I had to admit that I trusted his judgment more than my own. And he listened to so many questions from me about, are you sure that they'll do this? Are you sure that this will be okay? And blah, blah, blah. And I repeated myself so many times to him. And then I had to annoy my other best friend, Sabrina, by messaging her and saying, he hates me, doesn't he? I've asked him too many questions. He's annoyed with me, isn't he? He's sat there telling you that he never wants to see. So I annoyed both of them terribly. And then I turned up, and the atmosphere was the most chill thing that I've ever seen outside of a stoner's den. In my life. And it was like nobody was there was no sense of urgency about anything. There was no toxicity, and in any way everybody was just so happy to be with each other with no expectation. And Steve was like, why are we paying money to go to this event? They don't do anything. And I'm like, I know, isn't it great? They don't do anything. A lot of these events, they try to shove too much into the schedule, and there's no room to just be with each other. So when I went, and I was like, you know what, there's talks that I really want to go to and stuff that I really do want to do, because there is a very good schedule. He just didn't go to any of it because he's not heathen or pagan in any way. He just goes because I can't go alone, and because they steal in for the kindred games. But it was like, yeah, but you didn't do anything. I'm like, I just sat with people and I didn't feel scared. Do you have any idea how profound that is for me to sit amongst people and not feel any anxiety at all? I didn't have a single panic attack. There wasn't a single moment that I thought I need to leave. My fight, flight, freeze, flop disappeared. That doesn't even happen sometimes when I'm in my own house. It was, I genuinely couldn't believe that anybody could create a space like that. And I mean, there were moments for other people, as there are at any event, that were quite stressful. Poor Sedge running around like a blue ass fly. Sam hiding in those disgusting toilets. And I was like, what are you doing in there? It's like, I need a minute. I'm like, in there? Yes. Okay, you do you. Next time, take Sam a peg for his nose. But I mean, the toilets were.
Yeah, they were pretty bad.
Yeah, I think the only time I turned around to Sabrina and said, I want to go home. And it was literally because I needed the toilet. She's like, go home then. It's like an hour and a half. You'll make it before you piss yourself. But even with every access, like, I mean, there was the sensory tent, and that was amazing. And I feel very proud that I was even a small part of being able to get that for the members. And I spent most of my time there. And it sort of became, there was no eye contact. That was one of the things that I found, and one of the things that I didn't realize until that moment is one of the reasons that I find online stuff so easy is because there's no eye contact. So we were all sat in the sensory tent and we were all fiddling with something with our eyes on whatever we were doing, but still having those conversations. And it was as though we were just online. There was no fear, there was no anxiety about saying the wrong thing or anything like that. Everybody was just so totally relaxed. And there was one attendee who went in, they were having a panic attack because they were overwhelmed over something that had happened. And there was still no urgency. Nobody panicked. Everything was just completely calm. And, we all got our own stuffies out and started hugging things and just stimming together. And I was like, do you know what? These are my people. These are all my people. And it made me reluctant to go home. That's never happened to me before. And I felt the same sort of atmosphere there that I did at that first online festival. This is for us. These are our people. This is our space. I belong
It's important that we keep that in mind. Those of us that organise online stuff, it's important that we keep in mind that these spaces are essential, vital, and that no matter what fuck ups we make,
and there will be many,
to keep trying to get it right because they are so important. But at the same time, we also need to acknowledge that it can be difficult to make those spaces safe, and that we've got to keep working at it.
Yeah, it's got to be again dynamic. It's got to be constantly changing, and you've got to allow for the fact that sometimes a thing has to happen before you can know how you're going to handle it.
Absolutely.
And thinking that you have all the answers is how mistakes happen, is how toxicity is allowed to happen.
It's how growth stalls as well.
Yeah, and people want competent community leaders, people who know what they're doing. But I think people go too far the other way and act like they have all the answers, or act like someone should have all the answers. You don't want someone who thinks they've got all the answers. You want someone who says, okay, let's look at this and see what we're going to do. And just because something is online, it doesn't mean that the impact on a person's nervous system, on a person's mental health, and on a person's life in general isn't the same as if something had happened in real life. And as you've said, because people have a sense of entitlement and because people have a sense of, I don't want to turn this off, there's this thing with people who've experienced a lot of trauma where, because you've had people speak over you so often, you feel like you have to give all the information at the first instance of opening your mouth or typing. And so people feel like if they take a step back, somebody else is going to fill in that gap, and their autonomy and their right to express themselves is going to be taken away from them. And it does happen. unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I think learning to be okay with coming back later and saying, actually, now I'm going to have my say, or actually turning around and saying, this, I'm not doing it. Goodbye. You are a stranger on the internet.
Yeah.
Your opinion of me, in fact, does not matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that in sort of a dismissive way of you shouldn't care about what people think. I think you should choose and make informed choices about who you give that care to. And there are definitely situations in which that decision is taken away from you. Again, myself, I have had situations where I still have situations where what people think of me does have an impact on my life, a really debilitating one. I can't choose not to care because that has a direct impact on my life and I have to deal with it. In an online space like this, where you're mostly talking to strangers, the stakes of that are actually quite low. So it's a good opportunity to practice and say, actually, I don't want to talk to you because you're not bad. So I'm just gonna walk away. I'm gonna talk to these nice people over there. I'm gonna talk about pie instead because this conversation is too fraught for me. And one thing that I say quite often to people, and they don't like it, and I don't understand why, is it's okay to just say you don't know enough about a situation to have an opinion. You cannot possibly know all things, and because of the internet, there is this assumption that everybody knows all things. Just because we are in the age of information where you can learn about basically everything, a single person cannot do all the things.
No, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And
exactly
it's the same with your knowledge. You
Yep.
can know anything, but
Yep.
you can't know everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think people need to get better at showing a little bit of grace and saying, thank you for telling me something I didn't know.
Yeah.
Or just acknowledging personally you don't even have to say it to them, just personally to yourself. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Or I thought this has changed my mind. And in these spaces that you're trying to make safe and empowering people in their personal narrative and empowering people to say, okay, that's your experience, but this is mine. It's even more important for people to be able to say, my preconceived notions about what this is were wrong. Your personal experience has given me insight. And obviously, not everybody talks in formal terms like that. I do, but most people don't. I mean, even if all you say is, that's right good. Full Yorkshire it. That's right good. I didn't know that. Even if that's all you do, that it creates frisk again. You get this weaving of good feeling, positive vibes. I don't like saying that, but it is.
It's different now, and it's more positive than positive vibes because it allows you to have those adverse experiences and it acknowledges them as just as valuable as anything else.
You don't grow from positivity. Not really.
No,
you can learn from
positivity. You can learn something from it and you can improve some things. But life isn't positive. Life is hard. Life is full of accidents and events that we have no control over. And the toxic positivity side of things doesn't acknowledge that at all.
And I mean, also, we, as pagans, we are a minoritized group. But also, when you're talking about creating a safe space, it is not privileged people who have no problems that need a safe space.
Absolutely.
Safety is something they take for granted. So when you're talking about creating a safe space, what you're talking about is making a space that is fit for all persons, regardless of their circumstances. So you have to consider unsafety.
Yeah.
Nobody who has never had an adverse experience can create a safe space because they don't know what it feels like to be unsafe. And unfortunately for me, I am a perfect powder keg of, oh crap, that really happened to you, and using it. It's. I do not necessarily believe that everything happens for a reason, although I do know that there are a great many people in the pagan community that do. I am not one of those people because, frankly, I am far too jaded for that. However, I do like to think that I have put my adverse experiences to good use. And
I think
this is one of the ways that I do that.
Yeah, I think that's where again, the toxic positive spin on every cloud has a silver lining, um, is that if we can manage to process, to question, to change the way that we do things, then there is some good that can come from an adverse situation.
Like instead of a silver lining, can it become a yellow brick road?
Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of saying every cloud has a silver lining, say I don't need a silver lining. What I need is a more solid foundation on which to walk.
Yeah.
And it was like what Jean created for the community support team when I was in the PF, the threads of wellness, where you use all of these things to weave a carpet on which to walk. And all of these things were to consider the different aspects of a person.
Yeah.
And
the things that affect their lives and they need to consider on a daily basis and all that.
Exactly. And I think it's unfair. Like, I don't have this problem with the Grove because all we do is consider accessibility needs. We write in courses for education and resources and things like that. Fine, come on then. Come on. So there he is. Yeah. So I don't have the same problem that you do, and I don't have regional coordinators to have to see to, and you have this issue where the policy and the stuff that you do on a governmental level, and a law level, and stuff like that on legislation, can sometimes get in the way of the community stuff, which is why you have separate teams.
Yeah.
And I think that people forget that. I don't know how you do it. I know how you do it, but at the same time, I don't know how you do it. Is that whole skill sets need to be in the place that they are most useful, and someone creating a safe space for community that is just a social space. It should not be this complicated. It's that takes a certain skill set, but people are trying to do too many things. They're not like the people who can run a safe space and engender conversation and keep a group going in a safe and inclusive manner.
They're not the same people who can advocate at a board table at government.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
And I am not that. I used to be that person who could run those groups because I was constantly switched into every single person all the time. Yeah. I'm not that person anymore because I'm in the boardrooms and I'm writing the legislation and I'm writing the courses, and that's where my skill set is now. So I've had to shift. I've had to go, this isn't about my ego and where I want to be. I have to move over here and find people to do the other thing. And when you do that, there is a transition period between the way that you did things and the way that the new person does things. And then change starts to happen. And then people start to fight back against that because they don't want things to change. But if things don't change, things start to get through the cracks.
Absolutely.
And that's just a fact. So it's incredibly difficult. And if there's one thing that I want people to take from what is possibly the most rambling that I've done in a long time, it is that your volunteers are people.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a problem, it is their role to address it and to address you and your concerns, but you do not get to make them the villain unless they are actually in the wrong. You don't get to make them a villain just because you're not satisfied with the outcome, because you're not the only person to consider. And you may be the problem, in fact.
Doesn't necessarily mean they're a villain.
Exactly. I think that, again, paganism has so many, across many different pantheons, examples of people who are cast as the villain.
Yeah.
When actually, upon deeper reflection, they're not the villain. They are the necessary thing in that moment for a difficult situation. Winston Churchill, to the Brits, for a long time, he was considered the reason that we got through the war. But if you ask people in Africa or India and places like that about Winston Churchill, you will get a completely different answer.
Absolutely, because as humans, we see what we want to see and we disregard the rest.
Exactly. But this is not, but people are putting moderators on Facebook and Discord on the same level as people like that. I've been called a Nazi on several occasions. Just want to point out the Nazis would have killed me very, very quickly. and very violently, after electrocuting me for a few months, no doubt. But I have been called that on several occasions because in a moment, what I said to someone is, I'm sorry, I can't meet your need. That's all I've done. I can't meet your need. And their need at that moment was to boot someone out of a group just because they said something they didn't like. You know, little things like that are given these huge stakes.
Yeah.
And really, is that necessary? In some things, yes, it is absolutely necessary, especially in this world where people are being given license to say horrible things to each other, to vote in people that then further empower them to say horrible things to each other. Yes, in some cases, there are very high stakes. For the trans community at the moment, especially, it is a life or death situation. If you do not make that a safe space, that might be the only place that they felt safe. You've taken it away from them. That's life or death.
Absolutely.
But not every situation is that.
No.
And I'm starting to get very little this is why I don't run the groups anymore and I let my other volunteers do it. I've got very little patience for people that take these very low stake things and take up a lot of time with it when there's other people that need that energy in genuinely horrible circumstances. And I'm not saying that, you know, one person's problem outweighs somebody else's necessarily, but you've got to think, is that person said that something that I didn't agree with the same as that person just said I don't have a right to exist?
Again, there are levels.
These things and these things are happening simultaneously, but the same group of volunteers are the ones that are having to deal with it. So there does have to be a line.
And there does have to be framework and policy.
There has to be. And I think that, again, I had a situation where a volunteer left the Grove recently because we were trying to write that policy, that everything that we said, that person said was unsafe. And I have to wonder if they understand that the practical implications of not having any, because that's what they were asking for. Nothing we said was right, but wouldn't give any. Like, one thing that Mike Steigel taught me when I was with the Pagan Federation is, if you have an issue, it's best to come with a fix for it. And if you can't, admit that and say, I don't think this is quite right, but I'm not sure what to do to fix it. And that's what I do now. I do not complain about a thing unless I am willing to admit that I don't know how to fix it, or to say, actually, I think this would be a good idea to remedy it. That's one thing that we're probably going over now, but it's that we haven't discussed, is creating a safe space as a volunteer for volunteers, not just in terms of their energy, but creating policy that protects them in those discussions. When I came out of that meeting, I mean, people who don't know me probably think that I'm a bit of a bitch, which they're probably right, but people who know me know that it's actually quite difficult to upset me. I came out of that meeting crying. It's very easy to annoy me. It's quite easy to make me angry. It's extremely difficult to upset me. And I came out of that meeting crying. I sobbed and I couldn't talk for a while without bursting out crying again, because I was trying so hard to meet everybody's needs. And that volunteer was calling me unsafe and saying that I was a dangerous person because I was trying to create policy that would allow people to draw lines.
Yeah.
And you'd think that a minoritized person from a minoritized community would welcome some lines, any lines drawn somewhere. You know, it's that there is a middle ground. It just needs to move all the time.
It needs to be flexible.
It's a sliding scale.
Yeah, it needs to be dynamic according to the needs of.
Yeah. And those needs can change with every single new member.
Yeah.
One new member can be the difference between an old rule working.
Dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. And I think on the one hand, you can't meet the needs of all persons simultaneously because people have conflicting needs. At the same time, every individual counts. Every individual matters. And when you've got a group full of thousands, that becomes a daunting and time-consuming task.
Especially when you think about the impact and effect that what you're doing can have on every single person in attendance.
Yeah, and like with in-person events, you very rarely have that many people at once to consider. You know, those are some huge events, the likes of which the pagan community don't really do in this country. I mean, Witchfest is probably the biggest.
Probably.
Pagan tribal gathering. I don't know how many people they get that one. But they're some of the ones bigger in terms of attendees. And even there, they're not going to get into the thousands. You know, whereas in these spaces, not only have you got thousands of people sometimes, but you've also got 24 hours a day potentially. In my group, it is full of neurodivergent and disabled people, many of whom experience insomnia and are awake and wanting to access their community at the early hours of the morning. You know, and you cannot always have someone available for them. You want to, obviously, but you can't always have someone available for them in that moment. So we just need to give each other a little grace. I feel like I'm parroting Sarah a lot when I say stuff like that. But we do. We need to be a little bit. I'm saying it again. We need to be a little more gentle with ourselves and each other.
We do, yeah.
It sounds better when you say it.
Those of us that you know, navigate these spaces and spend so much time in them. I mean, you know, I've took a brave pill and started doing it myself in my business as well. So I host some very, very particular groups and circles that, you know, absolutely have to be safe spaces. But there are always inevitably some sort of issues that you need to be working through and dealing with.
Yeah.
You know, and some people just aren't right for the space.
I think that's another thing that people don't take into account. You can be a good person, a nice person, a kind person, a compassionate person, and you just don't gel with the space and those people. And not every space is for every person.
No.
I joined a group recently for people who love Shakespeare, because I love Shakespeare. And the space was just not what I was expecting for what was written in the group description. And I found myself getting annoyed at a lot of the opinions that people were expressing, because I felt that they were ignorant and not really fully considering the full scope and genius of Shakespeare's works. I felt that they were myopic. But instead of saying all that, I said, you know what? I'm just going to leave. I'm going to find another group. I still haven't found a group of others that are quite as anal as me with the looking into Shakespeare, but they just wanted to watch it. What? No, reading it's the thing, dissecting it word by word. But yeah, it's that's the problem with that though. Then you go into groups that do that, and they're all doing it academically, and it's like, no, I just want to talk about what a dickhead he is. But you know, by citing it.
There's always the opportunity to just start your own.
But say,
I am doing far too much already.
Add another thing.
And another thing, yeah. And there's difficulty as well in as a moderator in saying to someone, "Are you sure this is the space for you?" Because then it sounds like you're dismissing them. When actually, we don't have this as much in the Grove, because neurodivergent people do tend to take things at face value, whereas when you've got a lot of neurotypical people, if I was to say to a neurotypical person, are you sure this is the space for you, they would project a meaning onto that isn't there. It's like, well, what are you saying? Exactly what I said. I'm asking you a question. Are you sure that this is the space for you? There's no aggression. There's no, you shouldn't be here. I'd have said, if I meant that, you shouldn't be here. Or I'd have said nothing and I'd just kicked you out. I wouldn't have done that. That's rude. But, you know, if I'm saying to you, you should consider if this is the place for you. There are other places. You could start your own.
What you're actually saying is, are you comfortable?
Yeah. Yeah. And
is this giving you what you need?
Yeah. And I mean, one time I have said to someone, are we giving you what you need? And instead of taking that as I'm going to consider this myself and get back to you, they took it as this is all the ways that you're not running this group properly. You know? So it's different. Everybody thinks that they can do the thing that you're doing better than you.
Until they
rarely do they bother trying.
Until they do it, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I am one of those people that if I don't think someone's doing something right, I will either move away from it or I will do it myself. But the things that I do myself, it's because I know I can do it, because I have a track record of doing it. I personally did not feel that the Pagan Federation had the scope to do what I wanted to do as disability manager, because you have a policy and procedure, you have practices, and you have a very set aims and objectives that you have to stick to, especially now that you're a charity.
Especially now we're a charity, because we've got a specific set of aims, and our activities have to meet those aims. And,
exactly. You cannot do all things.
No, absolutely.
And if you try,
I think that's helpful for us at the moment, because there was a period in time where the PF was trying to be all things to all people. And now,
very non-communicative about it as well.
Yeah, and I think that now we do have that charitable status, and we have those very actually almost immovable aims that we have to achieve to maintain that status and to stay afloat, and to do the things that we need to do for the community. It's been very useful, because it's allowed us to focus. And it's allowed us to, although we might not want to let some things go, the reality is that those things no longer, for one, there are other people doing them better. And what we need to do instead is collaborate with those groups, so that we can offer our community a more cohesive group of organisations that are far more likely to be able to meet their needs consistently than relying on one organisation that is spread itself too thin.
And it goes back to what you were saying earlier as well about you growth comes from adversity. And one of a lot of what I do in the Grove is based on lessons that I learned from getting things wrong when I was the disabilities manager or the community support officer, and based on the things that I felt the Pagan Federation should be doing that actually were outside its scope. And I was incredibly naive at the time, again, much younger, incredibly naive at the time, and felt that those things should be, but what actually what I should have been thinking is, these are the things that need doing, not the PF should be doing them. So I've broken away, and all of the things that the PF cannot do because it's outside that scope, I'm doing instead. And actually, one of the things that I've learned from that is disabled pagans needed a space that was for them from the start. It was for nobody else, and they were an afterthought. We needed online spaces where we were the only consideration. And the other things came second. Now, obviously, there is intersectionality. There are minoritized persons who are also disabled and that kind of thing. But the disability comes first, and the neurodiversity comes first in the Grove, and then everything else comes second.
Whereas for the PF, it's the paganisms that come first.
Exactly.
So it should be, because that's our aim.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I was very good at doing the initial, let's get this group started and get it where it was. And I changed the community support team to a bit more of a dynamic thing that it kind of looks like now, but you took it further than what I did. Whereas with the Grove, literally all I've done is say, okay, we're listening. What do you want? And I got a group of elders together and I mean, it might sound a little bit like nepotism, but they were people that I had worked with before, for the most part, who I knew had expertise in running spaces safely.
That's not nepotism, that's finding the right people.
It's networking, I suppose. And I mean, we've got Jean Merrilees, who has extensive experience in supporting disabled people, not just in the pagan community, but in the general world. And her understanding of disability law, Equality Act, and actually putting that into practice is something that I very much value. But also, if she doesn't think that again, sometimes I'll go off with myself and go, oh, I've had a new idea. And she'll say, I'm not sure this fits with our aims. And I'm like, oh, fine. Fine, let's move on to the next thing. So it's and we've got that intersectionality in there as well, that one of our elders is an openly trans man, and he quite often discusses the interplay between how his disabilities and how his being trans sort of interconnect with each other. And that is an extremely small group of people in terms of the wider world, and how they experience the pagan community through that lens is a smaller group still. And those who are able to advocate and be an activist, smaller still. Those who are willing as well as able, again, smaller still. However, those people still need representation.
Yes.
And I am not going to sit in a space with these people in it and not give them that representation.
Yeah.
That would be wrong. That's not how you create a safe space. It's finding that. And there are some people that are all like, oh, you've got too many volunteers now. It's like every single one of them represents a community of people.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can have too much representation.
I think we're very off topic from SIFs.
Yes.
No,
they went into penises last time. That was definitely off topic.
We did, admittedly. But also,
I actually thought Dan was the one that was going to bring that up. He's always him, but it wasn't.
It was Nick, wasn't it?
Filthy Greek.
Yeah. But yeah, this has been the easiest podcast I've ever recorded.
Because we've just rattled at you.
No, it's been fantastic. That's what this has been.
This is how phone conversations with me and Debbie go. You know, we start off on one subject, and 4 hours later, we're like, "Oh, it's gone dark," and everyone else has gone to bed, and we've covered about 20 million different.
But in our defence, through that 4 hours, we get work done that we were struggling with. We start new projects that needed doing, and then we go, well, why didn't we think of that before? And so things get done. A conversation with us is never just a conversation with us. In fact, from this podcast, I've decided to create some infographics about that whole, instead of a silver lining, see the flaw that you can create with those negatives. So I'll give it to my elders and they'll make it prettier than that. But something pretty like that, because I do think that is a really important thing to take from that. So yeah, every time we talk, it's something like, there's never just a mundane talk with us, is there? No. I'm trying to think of a time.
That's why we don't talk very often, right? Because
we're too busy.
Because we end up, like, after any conversation we have, even when we did talk, like on a daily basis, we would go out with a to-do list like a mile long. So,
you remember I lost my book of lists? I used to have a book, and each page was a different to-do list for a different thing that I was doing. Do you know when I said I lost it?
Yes.
I found it the other day.
I knew it would turn up somewhere.
This is like 3 years later. With great trepidation, I opened it thinking, if I open this, am I going to start thinking that I've got to do all these things? But when I opened it, happily, I found that every single thing on there, I was either still doing because I remembered it and I'd put it in my new book, or the role had been given to someone else. And I was like, I mean, on the one hand, I could give them the to-do list. Yeah. I'm not spreading this misery. I will keep my neuroses to myself. And then I was actually looking through it and I realised it took 7 people to fill the roles that I was doing on my own.
Yeah.
It's not healthy.
No.
And if I was doing that in a physical capacity, instead of in online spaces, that wouldn't have been allowed. You don't allow it now.
No.
In online spaces. So it's, people take for granted just how much emotional labor things take, and I always try to bring things back to that. Thank you for your emotional labor. Now fuck off and rest. My volunteers have taken, not just in the Grove but other places as well, have taken to go, fine, off we fuck, before I've even said it. Thank you for your emotional labor. Yes, okay, off we fuck. So it's I'm becoming predictable. I don't know if I like that. My ADHD doesn't like it. Loki is poking on my shoulder and going, what are you doing?
Oh, there's still plenty of chaos you can cause, right? Just because there are some things that are reliable to come out of your mouth doesn't mean that there's not chaos in there still.
I am a ball of chaos with some twine that distracts me every now and again. I am a kitten on catnip. Oh dear. But yes, I think people need to join these spaces, and if the space doesn't have what they need, I hope that they feel able to express, this doesn't have what I need, but it has what I want, so can we have a dialogue? And in my spaces that I run, even if you don't feel my other volunteers are people that you can talk to, you can always come to me, because I might not answer straight away because I try to put my needs first, or Sarah bashes me over the head. But I will get back to you, and I will try to consider how I can meet your needs. And I have never once said to someone a flat out no. I have always been able to find, that's my only superpower, I think, other than just annoying people until they do what I want, which I use for good, is to be able to always find a way to make people feel that somewhere is safe for them. Because if I can't do it there, I find somewhere else for them. And I am absolutely relentless with it. And I think we need moderators like that say this might not be the space for you, but here you go. This might be. So at least if you're in any of my groups, I mean, if you don't feel like you can go to my other moderators, tell me why, and I'll give them a round the head. But because I'm very selective with who I allow to run my spaces. But you should feel that you can go to the admins and say, I don't feel safe here, or I really would like it if you would consider this, because sometimes it's not about safety, it's about being comfortable, and if you don't feel like you can talk to your admins, that's probably not a safe space for you just based on that thing alone.
And to the people that runs these spaces and that admin and moderate these spaces that we aren't in, try listening, because what someone's got to say, what they've got to request could make your life easier. It could make the whole space a better place. And if you don't keep an open mind in that, then you're never going to get anywhere. You're never going to grow. And
as difficult as it is for most people, try to put your ego aside and consider that you didn't create that. You shouldn't have created that space for yourself. Even if you were an element, I do quite a lot. There's not a thing for me, so I'll create one because I know I'm not unique. I am not special. I am the epitome of mediocrity. Therefore, if I need something, there will be many other people as well. Yeah. So unless you're that kind of person, that's fine. But if you're the kind of person who created a space because you wanted a following, or because you wanted a group of people that would listen to you, and there are many people like that, let's not pretend that there isn't. You need to put your ego aside and consider, even if you want them there to feed your ego, their needs still matter.
Yeah.
Listen to them. And if you don't want to listen to them, if you see listening to them as some kind of challenge to your authority or challenge to your knowledge, I mean, it makes you a twat. But there are other people that you can ask. Yeah. Ask other moderators. Ask privately so that your reputation does not have to be tarnished because you admitted you didn't know a thing. See, we cater for all needs, even if you're an egotist. Your needs matter too. There are always people that you can ask. And if you're not sure about meeting the needs, I'm going to plug here. If you're not sure about meeting the needs of neurodivergent and disabled people in your group, or trans people, or other members of the LGBTQIA community in the pagan community in your groups, you can ask the Pagan Federation. They have a national manager for all of these minoritized people, and for disabled and neurodivergent people in general. You can always come to the Grove of Aletheia. You can always come and ask me, because
and we also have advocacy specialists, safeguarding specialists, and all sorts of other things as well. So,
and I mean, that's what the Pagan Federation's for. Yes, it's to create those safe spaces. Yeah, exactly.
And to support people to create them as well. It's not just about us creating them. It's about making sure that the members of the community who want to create these spaces, or who do run these spaces, have somewhere to come so they can talk about these things.
Yeah. And I think there's that sort of culture of, I don't want to step on anybody's toes and do something that someone else has done, or something like that. But it is a thing that I have been saying for years. My whole job as a volunteer and an activist is to make myself obsolete.
Yeah.
If you come up with an idea that is built on something that I have done but is better, that's the whole point of having these conversations. I want someone to come along and say, I'm going to do this better than you. Yeah, for a minute or two, I might be like, oh my God, I'm not needed anymore. What is my entire being? If nobody needs me, I have no personality. I might be like that at first. But at the same time, I am going to be overjoyed that somebody is going to come along and, one, give me more time to do cross-stitching and reading because I have less to do. And two, make a space that's better.
That's what we really want to see. That's why we do this. That's why we volunteer the way that we do, is that we want to make things better. And there's going to come a point where we can't do it anymore, or it's time to move on, or whatever. And we need people who are going to come along and say, I can do it better, or I have different ideas. I have listened to this other group of people that you didn't get to before, or there's going to be something that improves it for the next generation, and then
you need to be able to say,
and again and again.
And you as the person who gets that person coming to them, you need to be able to say, okay.
Yeah.
Not how dare you.
Yeah.
Not what are you trying to say. Not what are you accusing me of. Blah blah blah. You need to be able to say, thank God I'm going to put my feet up. That's
the student should always surpass the master. That is the goal.
Absolutely. Enrique Iglesias is better than Julio Iglesias. You know, these things happen. You know, Luke Skywalker was miles better than his, you know, child killing dad. That was a bad example.
In the same way that I hope my kids will do life better than I did. You know, you should always be looking to the possibilities of the next people along.
I talk about, because I do a lot of activism, as you know, in supporting neurodivergent families and stuff like that. And one of the things that I always talk about is create your village. You cannot be all things to all people. You cannot even be all things to your one child.
No.
So create the village. I have created a village around my children. My children have far more godparents than really they need. But each one of those godparents has a thing that I do not have. You are a healer. Absolutely everything that you do has that at its core, healing, so that everything becomes easier, so that the next generation find it easier, etc., etc. And that's had a profound impact on the way that I parent. It's had a profound impact on the way that my children see things. And then there's Dan and Sabrina, who, you know, Sabrina has that, you're a healer, but there's not much gentle about you. You're quite ruthless in the way that you heal and the way that you act. And then along comes Sabrina, who frankly is terrifying. I don't understand how people don't see it. She's like that little bunny from Monty Python. Like, she's absolutely terrifying, that woman. But not for my children. All of the gentleness that I cannot give to my kids, they get from Sabrina. And that's why I brought her into the Grove of Aletheia, because everybody else that I chose to be an elder, it was for their competence. I mean, she's competent as well. I'm not gonna say that she isn't, but you know, they're competent in the thing that I've asked them to do, and actually they can again be quite ruthless. Sabrina, the only thing that she's ruthless in is how gentle she is. She lends a sunshine to absolutely everything that she does, and she is my sunflower. If ever I am thoroughly depressed, one conversation with her and I'm feeling happy again, even if all I do is listen to her be really, again, quite terrifying. She does it with pink cheeks and a big smile, and it makes me happy again. I don't understand how you do it. I think I just see a part of her that she just doesn't let other people see.
Like the sort of like beating black heart in the centre that you can see or something. But
I mean, she's basically my sister. She is absolutely the light of my life. Don't tell my husband, but she is absolutely everything to me, Sabrina. So I probably do see an aspect of her that other people don't see. And like the first time I encountered her, it was over again, creating an online safe space. And Dan had asked me for my opinion on something because he was concerned that the way that it had been handled lacked something in its accessibility, which is ridiculous because Dan and Sabrina, there's very little I could teach them in creating an accessible space. Sabrina is fantastic at what she does, and Danny's very, very conscientious of everything that he does. So Heathens of Yorkshire, if you're in Yorkshire, join them because they are a safe space. But he asked me for my opinion, and all I saw was this screenshot of this horrible woman. You remember Sarah? This horrible woman having a go at this other woman, and I messaged Sarah because she'd been showing the screenshots as well and went, Dan's wife's a bitch. What?
And we were both like, we like it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Like my first thing was, Danny's so sweet. What the is he doing married to such a horrible woman? And then I got the context and more of the backstory, and I was like, okay, this is a very tiny woman that has been very badly pissed off.
Yeah.
But none of that toxicity went into the group. The toxicity started there. They took it out, made it private, so that people could work through all of the stuff that was going on, and the group was protected, and they took all of that toxicity in themselves, and it's actually had a profound effect on them and on their mental health, and that's what happens to volunteers. But I mean, honestly, she is terrifying. Anybody who thinks that, when you see her at Tears Moon, Like, give her a wide berth because she's an ankle biter. She snaps. She
was on the first episode of the podcast.
and she just looks so sweet with her gorgeous smile and her little pink cheeks that are always pink, by the way. That's not blush, that's just her face. She's like a Disney freaking princess. But she's terrifying. I don't know how people don't see it. And then the kids are like, stop being so horrible. It's only Auntie Sabby. I'm like, you don't see what I see. She's very good at what she does, though. And again, the creating the safe spaces, what she does for AUK. She feels like it's not enough, and she's constantly sat there like, oh, I haven't done anything. And I'm like, are you blind? I mean, I know you're blind because the glasses, but are you blind? Are you not? But then Sarah's exactly the same way. I haven't done that much. It's all just, talking to people. But if I said the same thing to you, if I said the same thing to you and said I haven't done anything, what would you say?
I'd probably lecture you on all the things I could see that you'd done.
I think that it's absolutely true that people who want power should not be in a position of power.
Yeah.
So if somebody tells you all of the things that they've done, I would be skeptical. If somebody sits there and goes, not much, it's not a lot, like when we were listing at the beginning of the thing, where I've missed out so many things because I forgot. Because it's just my life. I don't sit here and catalogue.
Absolutely the same. All I said was, president of the Pagan Federation, witch in a heel of 25 years. And, there is
there's a lot
so much more.
A lot more. Yeah.
I mean, you don't write yours down.
I feel so old. I have to write them down or I forget, but I just don't always have the list in front of me. And obviously, there's stuff that's not relevant now that you have done in the past.
I have a little document of like bios, and it depends who wants one as to which one I said.
I've got to write one for uni, because I'm applying for my masters.
Yeah.
And Dan's like, well, you've got to put this in there. I'm like, why? Because I've just written a chapter for an academic book on neurodivergency in education. I think it's from Babel to old age, so it's like education across a lifetime and where neurodiversity sort of sits in there. And my particular chapter is on neurodivergence in higher education, and it's like 8,000 words of me getting angry. I think mostly I don't know why they've accepted it, and I'm still fully expecting the peer review to go and just reject it. But Dan's like, yeah, that doesn't matter though. You were still asked to write it because you're considered to be a voice in that field that is worth listening to. So put it into your thing for your master's application. I'm like, yeah, but isn't that bragging? And he's like, that's basically what they want you to do. I'm like, no, they don't want that. And it's like, I'm doing. Why are you not listening? Because I listen to him on absolutely everything until it comes to me bigging myself. I can't do the bigging myself up. I can't.
No, I'm not very good at it either. I was having this conversation with someone yesterday. I'm really not good.
But if you in certain situations, like again with stuff like this, I created this organization to support neurodivergent and disabled pagans. Everything that we do currently is online, although I do hope at some point to take it offline as well. And I keep having to be reminded by my elders, by Sarah, by Dan, by Sabrina. It's like, why would anybody listen to me? What right have I got to be the founder of an organization like this? And then they sit and list everything that I've done, and in that context,
and it's not about right, it's about you're the person who thought to do it, and someone else didn't, and there's nothing right about it. It's about the fact that you saw something and you worked out a way to do it and you got up and did it. There's a lot of people who think about it, don't get up and do it. And that's our actions are some of our most important things.
Yeah, maybe.
Do you think that's because we're British, especially here in Yorkshire? We whine and we stand in queues, but we don't actually do anything. We just want to sit and complain about it. It's our culture, and I think we should respect it.
Derbyshire's quite similar.
I remember someone when I was much, 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 much younger. I'm ancient. They turned around and said to me once, why do you feel? Why has it always got to be you? Why is it always you? And I'm like, I know. Like they were acting like it was my fault. It's like, yeah, why is it always me? Why me? And then you know why it's me? Because I am incredibly restless.
Yeah.
Nobody else is doing it, and so this restless energy has to go somewhere. And
Yeah.
I can't use my energy on myself. It's not in me to do that. I have to get other people to make sure that I do even simple self-care, like remember to, I haven't had a drink in ages. That's just reminded me. Remember to have a drink. Remember to have some dinner and that kind of thing. So like yesterday, I made 5 different meals for 5 different people because that's what I have to do every single day to make sure all of the people in my house aren't triggered by the food that they're eating because there's eating disorders and ARFID and stuff like that. And then I went to bed because I was so overwhelmed that I couldn't eat. And it's the same with the stuff that I do in the volunteer world. I get so overwhelmed making sure everybody else has what they need that other people have to go, yeah, but what about you? Oh, I'll do it later.
The carers always need someone to care for them.
Exactly. And
always.
like Dan said to me, I think it was last year, and I'm going to point out if he listens to this, we said it last year, by the way, Dan, and we still have to do it. That he said, you work so hard making sure everybody else can access their faith. When was the last time you actually practiced your paganism? I'm like, oh, fuck you. What?
I've had to start a group in my business so that I actively celebrate the festivals that mean something to me, because otherwise I would get so caught up in what I do for the PF and for the community and stuff like that that I wouldn't be practicing.
Yeah, like this ritual that we're doing at Tearsmoo, I had the idea for it, which was so similar to something that Sabrina already wanted to do, that we were like, yeah, let's do it together. And so we wrote it out, me, Dan, and Sabrina, and I just kept telling them to do the things, and they were like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to stand at the back.
I had the idea.
I'll be over here.
I am the muse.
I'll do the heavy lifting and carry the stuff into the veil and stuff, but then I'm just going to stand back and let you do your thing. Nobody wants my ugly mug in the middle of all that. And then Dan kind of took that from me, and it was all like, no, you two are going to do it, and I'm going to stand in the back. I was like, well, that's like having a football game and using your star player to pour water. Stupid. We hit a compromise and we're all going to be involved, but like my first thought was just stand in the background. I am not a person who puts myself, like, just doing this is the second podcast I've done in 10 years of doing this kind of thing, because people will ask me and I'll just recommend someone else that they can talk to on the same thing instead, and then I get told off and it's like, well, why didn't you just do it? Nobody wants to listen to me.
I do.
We're here, aren't we?
This is a character default, I think, in you. This doesn't paint you in the best light. So you need to take note of all the people that listen to this and don't give you messages of complaint about who this stupid person is that won't shut up. And be all like, okay, all of you people need therapy.
I am going to have to go, though, because it's 4:15. Oh
my God, see? I babble when I'm nervous. You should have just told me to shut up.
No, this is what I wanted. I wanted free-flowing conversation that wasn't forced. So this was perfect. And thank you very much, you two. Is there any other last-minute shout-outs you want to make?
I can't think of any.
Not really.
That would start another entire podcast. Do one entire podcast on just talking about the awesome work that other people are doing.
Yeah, we could do that, because there's lots of those.
Yeah, that list a mile long.
That is a solid idea, though. Like a signal boost.
Ideas again.
Here we go. Signal boosting other organisations. Yes.
Yes, absolutely, but only if they're accessible. That's the caveat that I will put on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should pencil this in. Absolutely.
Okay.
And I want to say thank you very much, you two, for being on this episode of the podcast. It has been fantastic.
It's been a pleasure.
You both inspire me in many ways, continuously. You will take this compliment because you can't turn off the camera or whatever, so...
I mean, I could, but it would be incredibly rude.
It would be really rude if we did.
You're just like, bye-bye, and I'll be like, well...
I will accept this compliment if you will accept when the next time Dan tells you that he is not your mentor, he is your peer, and you're on the same level.
Oh, look what you've done, Debbie.
No!
I will do my best to accept the compliment.
Thank you.
And I will go and stuff it in a pocket.
I will accept that. I will accept that opinion. That compliment is your opinion. How's that?
Yeah.
Compromise.
Okay.
I'm very good at accepting compliments that I then pass on to someone else.
I'm good at accepting compliments by saying, "Oh, that's very sweet of you to think."
Oh, okay. Well,
years of therapy to get to that point.
Thank you both. I'll let you get going. Thank you for being on this episode. Thank you for being who you are and what you're doing for your communities. It's very much appreciated and very much needed. And so many people are thankful for your efforts and intelligence and experience and expertise. And I will stop saying stuff now. We'll stop it there. But thank you for listening, listeners, future listeners. And yeah, how's the world doing? Oh no, okay, I'll stop now. I'll stop the recording.